Hi, my name is Hannah Merritt, and I am a senior honors anthropology student at the University of North Florida. My research, containment care and corpses, West African mortuary practices amid the Ebola epidemic, is my undergraduate honors capstone thesis and uses quantitative and qualitative methods to examine the correlation between mortuary practices and the 2014-2015 Ebola virus outbreak in West Africa. I'm interested in investigating the causal relationships between how Ebola influenced mortuary practices and how mortuary practices were influenced by Ebola by examining factors and components of West African environments, including geophysical and political environments, cosmologies, belief systems, and public health responses. I answered questions regarding how West African mortuary practices have been altered by the Ebola virus, and ultimately what the Ebola outbreak can tell us about pandemics such as COVID-19. The quantitative data for this research was pulled from the CDC and World Metrics Information Site and was cross-referenced with the World Health Organization. Qualitative data was sourced from peer-reviewed articles and books. Jumping right into the quantitative side of this research, I completed maps and charts and Tableau statistical software that examined population variables such as population density, Ebola case and death count, and ethnic group region of occupation. It was expected that countries with large population densities and large ethnic group occupations would have high case and high death counts. Countries such as Sierra Leone and Mali represented this expected result. However, other countries such as Liberia and Nigeria were flagged as outliers due to their abnormalities. This data was useful in supporting the significance of ethnographic data in terms of identifying outliers and the relationship between ethnic group occupation and outbreak hotspots. As for the qualitative side of this research, I completed several literature reviews about Ebola epidemiology, public health responses, and West African ethnic groups' mortuary practices. Understanding the pathology of Ebola and the initial response allow me to further grasp how Ebola would have influenced and been influenced by mortuary practices. I completed several ethnographic studies on the Kisi, the Ga, the Akan, the Fulani, and the Glibo, and the Ladaga ethnic groups. When examining their diverse mortuary practices, I broke down the process of body disposal into three parts. What is happening prior to the disposal? What is the disposal method? And what is happening post-disposal? This is seen in the chart in the methods section of my poster. Significant finds from my literature reviews include the documentation of post-mortem Ebola outbreaks and the acknowledgement of poor health infrastructure in West African countries. Quantitative and qualitative results do reveal that there is a correlation between outbreaks and mortuary practices. All of the groups I researched have in-ground burials that are quite interactive. For example, the Akan keep the deceased family member in their home until they can afford a proper burial. And the Glibo have large, elaborate social celebrations prior and post-body disposal. This is problematic because Ebola is extremely contagious and is still contagious for up to 8 days in a deceased individual who has died of Ebola. This interactive post-mortem infectious period that occurs at funerals is a huge indicator of the relationship between mortuary practices and Ebola. And it can explain these outliers that were defined in my quantitative data, and such as the country Liberia, a country that had high case counts but a small population density. There is also quantitative evidence that ethnic group regions correlate with the World Health Organization's outbreak hotspots from 2015. To conclude, there is a significant correlation between outbreaks and mortuary practices. Therefore, West African mortuary practices have been significantly influenced due to the Ebola epidemic, and the Ebola was significantly influenced by mortuary practices. As I mentioned above, the West African cultures examined typically practice these in-ground burials as a way of disposing bodies. During the Ebola epidemic, there was government mandates for cremation disposals, which inhibited significant cultural practices. While intent was good, this ultimately resulted in secret funerals and individuals failing to report symptoms. and deaths. Now, why should you care about this information? We are currently living in a global health crisis. And I recall everyone at the beginning of COVID saying, we don't know what to do. We've never experienced this before. However, beyond our Western world, there have been recent events of health crises that hold information we can use to better navigate epidemics and pandemics. We must consider cultural practices when dealing with these global health crises. It is imperative to decreasing case counts while adhering to an ethical code. It is the human condition to acknowledge death, may it be through elaborate funerals or simply laying next to our loved ones in their last minutes. We must understand and consider the human condition and culture as we reform standard health protocols, and we can learn from our past. Thank you.